It's The World This Week. The World This Week in partnership with The Daily Beast. Nico Hines, world editor of The Daily Beast, joins us from sunny London. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Good evening.
Also with us is Wall Street Journal correspondent Matthew Dalton. You brought your free Evin badge, Evin Gershkovich, who's held in Russian jail.
Yeah, he's been there for more than 6 months. His cruel, outrageous detention is continuing for we don't know how much longer. Hopefully he'll be released soon, and we're just hoping that he gets out very quickly.
Documentary filmmaker Paul Moreira is with us. Your latest opus about Russian oligarchs. We'll talk about that perhaps a little bit later on.
Pleasure.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
And thanks as well to Ana Navarro Pedro, Paris correspondent for the Portuguese press. How are things?
Good, and you?
Not so bad. The World This Week, where you can, by the way, listen. That's right, listen, like, and subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other fine streaming services. Would you be willing to risk arrest to stand up for what you believe in? Well, how about 13 times? The Nobel Peace Prize going to human rights activist Narges Mohammadi, currently serving what amounts to 12 years behind bars in Tehran's notorious Evin prison. From her cell, the 51-year-old activist putting out a statement for a prize that's a nod to all those who've risen up since last year's death of Mahsa Amini in the hands of Iran's morality police. She says, the honor will make her more resilient, determined, hopeful. I will stay in Iran even if I spend the rest of my life in prison. Narges Mohammadi, who's deputy head of the same human rights group as 2003 Nobel Peace Laureate Shirin Ebadi, she was defined as always in this 2021 interview that preceded last year's movement.
I hope one day to be able to tell you that execution have stopped in Iran and that women in my country have got their rights and that we have a better human rights situation in Iran.
Navarro Pedro with people from the Iranian diaspora this Friday, and they are heartened because there was this feeling that Iran was falling off the world's radar.
Well, for once, I mean, very often the jury of the Peace Nobel Prize is really on the side of things. Remember the Nobel Prize for Obama, which was one of the most killing presidents of the United States and so forth. Very often they are very political as well in their choices. This one is really gives us hope. I'm wearing an Iranian scarf, not on my head, around my neck. And no, it gives hope. And you were asking, are we willing to stand up with courage for our beliefs? Are we in Europe today, do we in Europe have as many courageous, brave people as this woman? I don't think so, and I really admire her.
Matthew Dalton?
Yeah, her courage is just awe-inspiring. I mean, she shares the traits of all the great human rights activists of the past century, past few hundred years. Brings to mind Martin Luther King, somebody who's willing to go to jail multiple times, willing to risk their life for the cause of justice and equality. And yeah, you just, I guess I agree with you. The Nobel Peace Prize Committee really got it right this time.
You didn't like it the time they gave it to the European Union?
Oh boy!
I think you should give it to a person. I don't think an institution should qualify.
The Nobel Committee's prize comes amid fresh outcry. This over a 16-year-old who fell into a coma after boarding a train last Sunday in the Tehran metro without a headscarf. It's unclear whether or not she was pushed by the morality police once again. But that's also a telling story in more ways than one, Paul Moreira, because even though there's been this massive crackdown, young women in Iran are refusing to put the veil on oftentimes.
Oh, they're very, very brave. But I must say, it's a very important topic, this problem of women's oppression. I did a documentary some years ago during the what was called the Arab Spring, because I was really fascinated by the fact that all this population wanted to be free, but at the same time, they were like sidelining the question of women, of sexual freedom, of gender equality and all that. And I wanted to dig into that and understand why there is still so much work to do in this culture, in this area of the world, in this region, to go into what is the essence of freedom, which is freedom not only for men, but also for women. And that's really at the center of the next years for them.
Iran's foreign ministry denouncing the awarding of the Nobel to a, quote, individual convicted of repeated law violations and criminal acts. Try telling that to Mohammadi's husband, who spoke earlier to reporters here in Paris.
This, without doubt, gives hope to the women in Iran and their movement for change. Back when Shirin Ebadi, another Iranian activist, won this prize, that definitely improved things. It's a long, painful road towards democracy, but it's worth it.
Yeah, and Nico Hines, she has not seen her children in 8 years.
I've got to confess that I was cut off and I don't know what you're talking about. Please fill me in.
And we were talking about the fact that we were just talking about the Nobel Prize going to Narges Mohammadi. Apologies for the technical issues between Paris and London. She's in a Tehran jail in the notorious Evin prison, hasn't seen her children in 8 years, and we just heard a clip there of her husband, defiant.
Yeah, it's a truly remarkable story, and always with these peace prizes, sometimes they highlight somebody that you didn't know the story of. Sometimes it's someone that you've been following the story for a long time. But in this case, it's a particularly brilliant winner, I think. Somebody who has put their own life on hold for years and years and years for a determined cause, for liberation for women, something that people all around the rest of the world get to experience on a daily basis. And she told a story when she spoke to the New York Times for a big interview earlier this year that her mother had said to her, whatever you do, don't get political, don't get involved in these things. It's not worth the hassle, it's not worth the cost. And she has sacrificed her, a huge proportion of her life and missing the growing up of her children to fight for something that she believes in. I think a truly brilliant and worthy winner.
Yeah, turning our attention to matters closer to our studio here in Paris, when one Russian missile wipes out a third of a village's population, citizens in Hroza, that's in northeast Ukraine, were gathered in a cafe for a funeral wake when it was targeted by a ballistic missile, at least 52 killed.
He was local. He was killed during the occupation and buried somewhere in Dnipro. And then they decided to rebury him here in the village to bring him home. When the missile hit, people had gathered for the wake. Many people died, including my brother, my sister-in-law, my mother.
Russia repeating that it only hits military targets, Matthew Dahl.
Well, this is something that terrorist groups do. They'll set off a bomb somewhere, and then a few minutes later, they'll set off another bomb to target the emergency services who respond to the incident.
You're talking about that second attack we saw this Friday in Kharkiv.
Well, I'm just talking about the general strategy. I mean, it's in this particular, the missile strike targeted, it seemed to be targeting a funeral of somebody, of an event that occurred afterwards of another Russian strike. So I think, this is something, I think for missile strikes, they're called double tap missile strikes, where you hit the same target twice. It's just Russia's lying when it says it doesn't target civilians. I haven't seen any claim that there was any kind of possible military target in this strike. So it's just, it's just absurd that Russia keeps claiming this.
News of the attack on Hroza broke just as Ukraine's president was shoring up support among European allies Thursday at, I guess you could call it, an EU and Friends summit taking place in Granada, Spain. This just days after $6 billion in U.S. aid became a casualty of a congressional budget compromise in Washington.
And challenges what we have, that is to save unity in Europe. And I'm speaking not only about the countries in EU, in all the Europe. I think that is the biggest challenge what we'll have, because Russia will attack by information, disinformation, by fakes, and etc.
You can hear, Nico Hines, the emotion in Volodymyr Zelensky's voice as he speaks in English there.
Yeah, I think this is a very dangerous period for Ukraine. It seems that wherever you look in the world, whether it's in Europe or in the United States, that the trend lines are heading away from people being willing to hand over huge sums of money to support this war in Ukraine. You know, 6 billion was lost, and that's kind of neither here nor there. The Pentagon's got some money to tide it over at the moment, but there's a big battle about to come underway for a next $25 billion tranche, and it's arguable whether that is enough, even if it is
whether that's enough. Nico, I'm going to interrupt you. I'm just going to interrupt you because we're having, again, a technical problem. We're going to try to fix this as soon as possible with the line to London, just on the audio there. Apologies once again. It's a worrying time for Ukraine and Navarre Pedro as we head to winter.
As we head to winter, but you know, there is something very hypocritical from allies of Ukraine, whether it's the United States, Canada, or European Union or European countries, since the beginning of this war. War material has been given to Ukraine on the crescendo of its impact and force on the military field, but not necessarily in the way that allows the Ukrainian army to win. Even the famous Leopard tanks and the Challenger from the British, so forth, they arrive like one after the other, or 14 or 40 at a time. And if I'm no military, so if I speak with some military and ask what is the impact of 14 or 22 Leopard tanks in this front, in this war, they say none whatsoever. If you don't have anything else, a lot more of material around it, you can maybe get some territory or make in per se, just go a little bit deep into Russian defenses in one point. But it's such a huge extension of territory that you cannot make a big difference. And things have been given one by one, 20 by 20. The Ukrainians have told us very often the material is not up to date, the material is not working, is not fit. Very often it's the old stuff that is being given to them, the one that, you know, that we didn't know what to do with it. So it's really hypocritical about us to... It looks as if we are doing things in such a way that the war keeps going on. We'll see which way it will go. So many people are dying. The country is being destroyed, and we are just freezing this war in where it has been since a year ago.
Okay, but what do we do? For instance, I'll give you an example, Paul Moreira. There was this week the German Chancellor who contradicted his coalition partners and refusing to export long-range Taurus missiles that the German produce. There's always that worry that helping Ukraine becomes a direct confrontation with Russia.
Yes, obviously everyone is weighing that, but I think Ukraine is paying for the failure of the summer offensive, counter-offensive. Everybody was building up a lot of hopes on the fact that maybe, you know, during the nice season that they could go through the Russian lines. Apparently the Russians have supermine during miles and miles, and it's very difficult to go through and to be efficient with that. So it's a moment that is very difficult for everybody. I read an article like a month ago of people were mentioning the fact that there is about 330 billion euros or dollars of Russian assets apparently linked with Central Bank of Russia, and that could be something that is. It's something that is. It's some that are frozen, but that could be used to rebuild Ukraine. It could also be used as leverage against Russia. I mean, it's nowadays we have to explore all options other than military if you want to be efficient in helping the Ukrainians, because we have to face the possibility that this war, militarily speaking, is now at a stalemate. It's difficult to go one way or another.
A stalemate that could run till November of 2024 and beyond. Mm-hmm. And that's something that Ukraine is worried about when they look at the United States the past week. There was that aid that was frozen, and there was, inside the Republican Party, a revolt provoked by loyalists to Donald Trump. For the first time ever, a sitting Speaker of the House of Representatives ousted. Kevin McCarthy bounced after that budget compromise. On this point, Matthew Dalton, your thoughts on this is like a domestic little argument within the Republican Party you had, and it's got these worldwide implications.
It's true, and it's interesting and kind of frightening how small the margins are that can really
eight Trump loyalists.
Yeah, that's all you need.
Who sided with the Democrats.
Yeah, it's a function of sort of the dysfunctional rules of the House of Representatives. You have it's the entire body that needs to vote on the Speaker of the House. And so if you have a very closely divided House between both parties, a few defections either way, and that can just throw everything into turmoil. And that's what we have right now. I think this sort of, the chaos that we're seeing right now, though, I think masks a little bit the fact that there is still, among both Republicans and Democrats, is very strong support for Ukraine among the vast majority of both parties. And you have these few dissidents in the Republican. You have a faction within the Republican Party. It's a minority, and it's a powerful minority that is challenging Ukraine, the aid to Ukraine, that does not support it. But the vast majority of lawmakers in both parties still support it, and that's good news for Ukraine. And I think that support will be there. And frankly, even if Donald Trump does win, what he's saying now is one thing. When he gets into office. Yeah. He doesn't have any kind of principled positions pretty much on anything. So
okay, but right now there's the race first to succeed the House Speaker. Yeah. A big endorsement coming for Jim Jordan. He's this firebrand Ohio Republican who heads the so-called Freedom Caucus, obtaining the backing of a certain Donald J. Trump, the former president, putting out a statement on his Truth Social platform. Where he said he'd be a great Speaker of the House and has my complete and total endorsement. If you have someone closer to Trump manning the gavel, again, does that move this isolationist trend further?
Yeah, it does. It does move it further. I think it's going to be a problem. I think the big question is whether he can get the support of the entire Republican Party. I think there are members of the Republican Party still who are very strongly in favor of supporting Ukraine. They come from the somewhat more old school wing of the Republican Party as it used to be pre-Trump. There are still a lot of people like that in the House. And if you have a Speaker who is going to be strongly, who is going to block support for Ukraine, I think that could really prevent him from ever being elected Speaker. I mean, it's hard to. Everything is up in the air, but I think it's going to be. This is something that really divides the Republican Party, but the numbers are still in favor of the pro-Ukraine cause.
Anna Navarro Pedro?
Just going back to if Trump is elected, which doesn't seem to be it's a plausible possibility. If he is elected, of course, he'll be sensitive. I mean, he'll listen to the makers, the industrials who make guns in the United States, the armament industry. Because, let's not be naive. A big chunk of the money that has been given as aid, announced as aid to Ukraine in the United States, hasn't left the United States. It has been given in deals to the big corporations that make guns, make all the material, war material needed in Ukraine. So.
Yeah.
So that has a lot of things to do. It has to be the fact that there are factories someplace where there are congressmen, congresswomen who will need those jobs staying over there, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
The military-industrial complex is a big employer and has a lot of
And
power.
Trump will be listening to them.
Yeah, so you're
sure.
absolutely right. I think that is a if Trump is going to start proposing to cut funding for those factories, there's going to be those companies are going and those congressmen are going to speak up.
And that's another factor that makes that this war keeps going on. No one is looking for peace, where actually the thing to go for now is trying to get a peace deal, even if it means that Ukraine will lose more territory than it would have lost a year ago or in March 22 if they had the peace deal would have gone ahead.
Certainly not what the Ukrainians are saying. Meanwhile, no public infighting in Moscow, at least not since the demise of Wagner boss Yevgeny Prigozhin, whose private jet appeared to be shot out of the sky after takeoff from Moscow back in August. Now Russia's president wonders aloud if someone didn't drop a loaded hand grenade on board.
Oh.
К сожалению, наличие алкоголя или наркотических средств в крови, погибших, экспертиза не проводилась. Хотя мы знаем, что после известных событий в компании в Петербурге ФСБ обнаружило не только 10 миллиардов наличными, но и 5 килограмм кокаина. Но повторяю еще раз, на мой взгляд, надо было бы провести такую экспертизу, но она не была проведена.
Yeah, by the way, it's not so much what Putin said there, but where he said it. The Russian president speaking at the Valdai conference in Sochi, which brings together politicians, academics, and business executives. Business executives, or as Paul Moreira called them in his documentary aired recently by national broadcaster France Télévisions, oligarchs. And in that documentary, you show how Vladimir Putin has gone from civilian oligarchs to, and this brings back to what you were saying, Ana Navarro Pedro, about the war effort, to militarized oligarchs. Explain what militarized oligarchs means.
Well, there are two that have been identified. First of all, that we know that the oligarchs, even guys like Deripaska, who are civilian and old-timers, have been helping materially with money, the war effort. But there are two oligarchs that have been identified as war oligarchs. Is Malofeev, Konstantin Malofeev, is alive, so he's still alive. So I'll talk about him first. Is a guy who has been putting a lot of his money in the far-right national populist movements in Western Europe, in France. He has been he has been operational in helping the National Front back then, and Rassemblement National today.
Marine Le Pen's party.
Right, to get some financial help. He is really investing most of his money into creating a political space sympathetic to the Russian interests. And then there was Prigozhin. Prigozhin was a war oligarch for a long time because he started before Wagner. Most of the people don't know, but before Wagner, he started the information war. He had created what was called the Internet Research Agency, yes. IRA, with the troll farm in St. Petersburg, where you had people who worked in 3 shifts nonstop, pretending to be either American, French, English, and disseminating on Facebook, on Twitter, under false identities, false information or propaganda that would be useful for Putin's interests. So, yeah, and then he created Wagner that we all know about, and then for some reason that still is not clear yet, he decided to march on Moscow in June, and that was a really bad idea because usually Putin does not like that you turn your guns on him. It's actually the first time it happened. And as we know, he was playing with a grenade, and unluckily his plane fell off the sky. Things happen sometimes.
Play with grenades on planes.
Bad things tend to happen. What's interesting is that we mentioned earlier that Grenada European Political Community Summit where Volodymyr Zelensky popped up. Turns out the EU has not one but 3 fires to deal with at its doorstep. Ukraine is one, and then there's the South Caucasus. Armenia's prime minister present in Spain Thursday after Baku's takeover of Nagorno-Karabakh. Not Azerbaijan's president. He stayed away from Spain. Ilham Aliyev happy to talk later, face-to-face, he says. Not yet, and maybe not with France in the room. Not after the French foreign minister went to Yerevan on Tuesday.
I would like to publicly state that France has agreed on future contracts with Armenia, which will allow the delivery of military equipment to Armenia so that it can ensure its defense. You'll understand that I can't go into more detail at the moment.
And she's now for the first time used the word ethnic cleansing when it comes to Armenia. So is France too much of an outlier compared to the rest of the European Union on this matter?
Well, I'm not sure to what extent that policy has been negotiated with the rest of Europe. I mean, it's interesting that in this issue, Russia was the country that negotiated the peace agreement between the two sides in 2020, and it's effectively Russia's distraction in the war in Ukraine and their inability to enforce that agreement that has made the situation so difficult right now, and is the reason why tensions are flaring up. I think it leaves a space for other countries to try and come in and do something. But France does seem to be taking a side, at least in that particular instance, siding with Armenia. Azerbaijan is also very important for Europe because it's a big natural gas supplier to Europe now. Now that Europe is really not buying Russian natural gas, so it's a really tricky situation, and you've got interests on both sides.
A really strong rumor has it that some of the gas coming from Azerbaijan actually is Russian gas transiting via Azerbaijan.
Small part.
We'll see. Yes, you were saying that it's Russia that is distracted in Ukraine that has allowed for this situation in Caucasus. We can also see the hand of the president of Turkey, Erdogan, on Azeri's military offensive right now. And let's not forget that by the end of this month, Turkey will celebrate 100 years of Atatürk's republic. And there are going to be big announcements by Erdogan. Let's see what he's going to say. He is also dealing now with India to have a kind of spice route, not the silk route, but the spice route from India to Turkey that would go through Caucasus, and that would change that would need for Armenia not to be there with this little stone that is the Nagorno-Karabakh right in the middle of on the path, in the way. So there are many geopolitical issues in what is going on in the Caucasus right now. But let's say one thing. Thanks goodness the Foreign Affairs Minister of France said there is ethnic cleansing going on now. Because if we hadn't said that, if we hadn't acknowledged the reality, then we'd have lost our souls forever. Because, this is Armenian territory that has been invaded by Azerbaijan, and we are not doing anything about it. Whereas we are siding with Ukraine, rightly, because it was invaded by Russia. And remember, in 1999, NATO bombed Serbia for 33 consecutive days, saying that Serbia would be bombed back to Stone Age to take Kosovo away from them. So people don't forget in Europe. All the people don't forget. And this hypocrisy, this immense geopolitical hypocrisy and cowardice by Europe will have a price for all of us. I think Colonna has saved the day for France.
All right, so we mentioned there with Anna the third fire that's at Europe's doorstep, and that is the Balkans. Both Kosovo and Serbia represented at Thursday's European Political Community Summit, but they're not on speaking terms, so there was no meeting either. Not after a firefight last month left 4 dead in northern Kosovo and triggered a sudden Serbian troop buildup that had NATO scrambling, sending more British peacekeepers. Nico Hines, The Daily Beast reported this week on how Russia's media outlets have stoked tensions for years. Again, it's partly stoking that resentment that's been around for a quarter century.
That's right. Russia always likes to stick its oar in when it sees a potential problem, something it can rile up. And the Russian media outlets have been doing a great job over there of interfering in this argument, in this dispute. You've got Sputnik and you've got RT, both have Serbian language websites, and RT is setting up a Serbian language, some Serbian language actual TV shows that they can try and inflame this war. And it's the same with the question of Armenia, where you're seeing these two different influences. You're seeing the European influences, which Kosovo are trying to lean on, and Kosovo are calling on the EU to actually sanction Serbia, which seems a little bit over the top for this one strange little incursion, but it's Kosovo going to the EU while the Serbs rely on their backers in Moscow. And just like the reason that France's intervention in Armenia was so important and so welcome was because Armenia have been looking to back away from Kremlin as being their supporter, their overlord, and they're trying to make overtures to the EU. And so it's been absolutely crucial that France has stepped in and said to Armenia, we've got your back. And once again, it's these massive geopolitical moves that are kind of playing out over what could potentially be small squabbles. Each of these things just seems to keep getting inflamed.
Why is it, Paul Moreira, why, again, it's not one, not two, but three sources of real tension. Why is it being inflamed at this time?
Well, obviously because the game being redistributed all over the Eastern European territories. But I want to go back to Turkey because there is another spot that we are forgetting is the Kurdish in northern Syria. Turkey has been bombarding them for the last 2 days because of the attack against the Interior Ministry in Ankara by the PKK. This is also something that we could question. I mean, we owe the Syrian Kurds to be at peace. I mean, they got us rid of ISIS with some sacrifice, I must say, and we let Turkey bomb one of our best allies, the Syrian Kurds, without uttering a word. Yes. I mean, it's a moment, an historical moment that is really uncomfortable because we make a lot of noise for certain areas of the planet, and we let, for me, crucial areas in the dark and in silence, which I think is questionable.
And can you do it? And we're talking about EU enlargement at this summit that took place in Spain. Yeah. Can you, at 27, it's already difficult enough.
But the intention is good, but my feeling is that they get together more for the cameras than for efficiency. So but it's more a photo op. But
the real solution for at least the Kosovo-Serbia fight is to bring both in at some point into the EU. That's the thing that would, I think, really over the long term end that fight.
But how can you do that when you still have countries like Spain who don't officially recognize Kosovo as an independent state?
Well, yeah, you have difficulties like that, but I mean, North Cyprus is a divided country. You've got the north, which is not recognized by Turkey, and so there are these kinds of territorial disputes that are still out there for countries that are members of the EU. So it's something that I don't know how you could solve that particular problem, but this is kind of what the EU is there for, to end these,
by no means. It's not there to be a ward for ill countries in Europe or outside Europe. Well, this is an institution that is dying, actually.
But the Eastern European countries, when they came into the bloc, they were kind of a mess, a lot of them. And
it was a mess. It's still a mess.
The EU did a lot of good.
It's still a mess because the institutions weren't updated as they should have been. And we are not there just to take in everybody as a solution, because that is not a solution, that is killing.
Nico Hines are talking more about qualified majorities at the EU level to make decisions so that it won't be so unruly, if they do enlarge. Your thoughts, because again, that first day of the summit in Spain featured the only former EU member, Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister of Britain, was there for that European political community meeting.
Well, it was very nice for you to invite the little guy over to have his day and shake a few hands. I think, I think it's very tempting to want to invite as many countries into the EU as possible. And certainly when we seem to be kind of edging towards some sort of strange reenactment of the Cold War now, where the Kremlin is trying to exert its influence over these countries and the EU is trying to do the same. And I think that is a danger. And I think it's something that we don't want to, but we don't want to be forced into a position where the European Union suddenly takes on a whole load of countries which it hasn't figured out how to handle. It hasn't figured out the economics of how that would all work. And obviously the biggest one of these is Ukraine. I mean, people talking about Ukraine joining the EU, I mean, that is just such a massive and fundamental change. It's an enormous country, which is which currently at war, and perhaps will be at war for another 5 years. We don't know. But even if once the war ends, you've got hundreds of billions of pounds worth of repairs and rebuilding that are going to need to be done. So if something like that was to take place, it would be a fantastic achievement, and it would be something that you'd have to absolutely say was one of the EU's greatest wins. However, who would fund it? Who would pay for it? What impact would it have in Paris, in Berlin, in Madrid? It's a huge problem.
All right, you can't blame Putin's Russia for everything, although France 24's Truth or Fake segment picked up on doctored news web articles from prominent French newspapers like Libération and Le Figaro that blame a bedbug scare on, get this, Ukrainian immigrants. Yes, indeed. Paul Moreira, you were talking earlier about troll farms. Guess who's being blamed for that?
I have no words for that. No, but bedbugs are bad. Bedbugs are bad.
You've experienced it personally?
Yeah, I had bedbugs once, and it's like takes 3 days to get rid of them. You have to go to the washing machines and hire a guy who comes with a all in white and sprays some stuff on your house and chemicals and stuff. No, it's serious. I mean, it's a pain in the neck, really.
It's a very good distraction from news. It has fear. You are afraid of it. Each time you hear the name. Everybody is just talking about it, concerned about it. No one is thinking about inflation, about the war, about taxes, about how badly or well they are.
In fairness, it's because of these viral videos that have been popping up on social media.
It's all fake news, because all these rumors pop up. They're in the metro, they're in movie theaters, they're someplace else. Then they go do an investigation. They don't find a single bedbug. But it's just like they're stamping out, they're fighting rumors of bedbugs, not actual bedbugs.
I must say that I got my bedbugs in a hotel in Moscow, so that's it.
Talk about turning the tables. When it comes to bedbugs, it's not just the Russians, by the way, piling the pain on the French.
There are bugs in Paris that are bigger than fleas, and they make you itchy. They could be in your sheets, so check underneath. And if it were me, I wouldn't do Airbnb.
All right. And he goes on. There was a writer's strike. It's over, Nico Hines.
Not soon enough.
What do you think about all this, what we call here, French bashing?
Well, I think this bedbugs crisis is an absolute classic example of mass hysteria, where it's a kind of like contagious thought process where people read about it because people are getting more excited about it, and then there are more stories about it, so then everyone's more worried about it, and it's just one of those contagions. It's funny because New York City a few years back had a very similar mass hysteria over bedbugs, and people were panicking all over the place. And the story seems to have faded away, but I've not seen any evidence to suggest that New York bedbugs have been tamed or have gone away. I think after a while, everyone just gets bored of the story and moves on. Bedbugs have got worse over the last few decades, apparently, but I think it's okay to just calm down. We don't need to worry about it too much.
How much did it cost you, Paul Moreira, to get rid of it?
I think something like almost €1,000.
Almost €1,000.
That's a lot of money.
And that explains why this has become now an issue with bedbugs inviting themselves to the French National Assembly earlier this week. The head of the left-wing opposition even brought a vial of the critters to Prime Minister's Question Time.
6 years on, your inaction is largely responsible for this explosive situation. The longer you wait, the more out of control this situation becomes. We demand a free, effective public pest control service that protects health and the environment.
But then the transport minister, parroting the words of Matthew Dalton, insisted it's not an issue that the government is, quote, and this is a quote, sweeping under the carpet.
There have been no confirmed cases of bedbugs in the cases that have been reported, particularly in the photos of the metro that have been circulating recently. I would also stress that bedbugs are often reluctant to be exposed to light, so when we have a case that is under the eye of a camera, so to speak, there is very little chance that it is a bedbug, but this has been checked every time. We will continue to take a serious approach, ensuring transparency, verification, and preventative and curative action in public transport.
That said, okay, the numbers have gone up, just as the numbers of tropical diseases have gone up. And as human beings migrate to cities, there are more cases of these things. There was a case where they had to fumigate a school in Marseille recently for bedbugs.
Well, I think France is more a victim of the world's interest in France in terms of tourism than infecting the rest of the world. It's basically, I mean, tourists are bringing these bedbugs to Paris in their luggage
from Moscow,
and taking them
from wherever, from New York, from wherever. It's just Paris is the most visited city in the world. It's the most visited tourist destination in the world. So, yeah, I mean, we're kind of being the world is inflicting their bedbugs on us, not the other way around.
Anna Navarro-Pedro?
I think it can go wrong. I was just listening to an interview of a woman in Nevada. She worked for the local government and the governor. And she was saying, every day I get calls about bedbugs in Nevada, everywhere. Towns, rural areas, schools, houses. So it's a general world problem. But I mean, someone is using it in France right now for some reason.
Yeah, and the left is calling for the government to help subsidize the fight against bedbugs. Conservatives, not just the far right, are saying it's immigrants that have brought the bedbugs.
Yeah, that's the example of it was a guy on CNews, which is like the French Fox News, that said that I just want to ask the question. I just asked the question, but we have so many migrants now. Maybe they bring bedbugs, and there was an uproar because obviously there is no evidence. And I mean, it's usually bedbugs find a better nest in a luxurious place than in a tent with a migrant. So
as my colleagues wrote when we covered this in the paper, it's become a political Rorschach test in France. It's like, if you're on the right, you blame immigrants. If you on the left, you blame the government not doing enough. And it's like, and yet there's no bedbugs that they found. They haven't actually found a bedbug.
Oh, the parliamentary woman in pink, we just saw before in the parliament, she had a vial actually with the bedbugs. And I just remembered Colin Powell, in the United Nations with a vial. Yet we know now it was just water. And I said, well, that is maybe not the best publicity.
Will Mathilde Panot's vial or this bedbug scare keep Nico Hines away from the Olympics next summer? Nico, will you come and join us?
Yeah, I can't wait. I love on the Rorschach testing. I love that Matthew Dalton, let's not forget, was blaming it all on tourists. So he could find everybody's secret hatred. I think we've exposed his. So let's.
Very good.
I think we should be very concerned about how he's going to take the Olympics next summer, because it's going to be rammed over there.
All right,
I'm getting out of town.
Between now and then, there's a Rugby World Cup going on. Nico Hines, many thanks for joining us from London. I want to thank Anna Navarro, Pedro Palmerera, and Matthew Dalton. Thank you for being with us here in The World This Week.